Hello. Today I'm going to share with you my lesson plan that I created for the Climate Hub partnership. Um, my name is Sheryl Standiford. I am a teacher at Lago Vista High School. I teach agriculture science in Lago Vista, Texas. So my lesson is based out of the Balcones Canyonlands Wildlife National Refuge, which is about 5 miles from our school. So I thought it would pertain to our students better. I took my learning objectives from my plant and soil science class. And that is the class that I used this lesson in because they were 11th and 12th graders. And I thought they might be ready to learn about this information. But I do think you could probably change it and use it with principles of agriculture students, which are 9th grade. So my lesson focus and goals was to identify some sustainable agriculture methods. I really do want them to be aware that that is important as they go through life. We are a lake community, not really a farm community, so this is sort of new information to a lot of them. And then I wanted to add some technology into the lesson. I used a RAP, which is the Rangeland Analysis Program, and FEIS, which is the Fire Effect Information System. And then I wanted to basically compare and contrast pyrrhic, herbivory, and prescribed fire. So to start out my lesson, I invited a guest speaker from Balcones Canyonlands to our classroom. I gave the students a guest speaker questionnaire so that as she was talking, they were paying attention to what she was talking about, but then at the end that they would have some good questions for her and get some good conversations going. She introduced the Canyonlands, talked about the fact that they use prescribed fire there, and then compared and contrasted what they use versus what Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge does in Houston. So the kids got an idea of what happens around us and also about 3 hours away, which is where Houston is. Then I went into explaining the different conservation practices that I wanted them to learn about. I created a PowerPoint that I just showed them, and they took notes as we went and asked questions as we went through the PowerPoint. They wrote notes on their own. I did not have any kind of guided notes for them to use for this PowerPoint. After going through that PowerPoint, because I introduced the RAP system and FEIS to them, then we went into further in depth about those two programs. So the first one we did was the FEIS, the Fire Effects Information System. And I just pulled the video and the PowerPoint off of that website because it was good and useful to use. And then I also pulled off their guided tutorial and used that for the students. And I took them step by step through that. I started out letting them kind of do it on their own, realized that that was a little bit difficult for them to do. And then we went through and kind of did it together as a group. The Fire Effects Information System has some great information on it. It basically takes any species that is in the area, animals or plants, and it talks about the different things about that plant, like all the information about how to grow it, where it grows, why it grows, if it's native, if it's invasive, all of those things. But then it also talks about whether it has a fire study done on it. So we so what I did is I specifically took some plants from Balcones, and I created a worksheet where they had to go through that website, they got assigned a specific plant, Then they went through this worksheet and found out all the information about that plant. And then after that, I put them into groups, and then they discussed their plants and all the different things they learned about it. And then they talked about the different fire studies. So this gave the students first of all, one plant that they know a lot about, and then 5 plants that they have a good working knowledge of. Later, we used that when we went on our field trip, and they were actually being able to identify and spot their plants that they researched. So that was good to see. Then I went and I talked to them about the program of RAP, Rangeland Analysis Platform. The Rangeland Analysis Platform has information about the land. So it tells you the percentage of cover and changes over time from 1986 to now. And so we went, I created a PowerPoint, and then I created a guided notes so they could write down as we went. And then we used that information to create another assignment for them to be able to kind of explore on their own, was the plan. And so I created a slideshow, a PowerPoint that had information about Balcones Canyonlands. And they went through the PowerPoint and then answered questions. Basically, they were analyzing the graphs about the percentage of the different annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs, and then they also then looked at change over time. So I did this is what it looked like in 1986, and this is what it looked like now. This information was good to have because we knew from our guest speaker when they implemented prescribed fire at the Balcones. And so you could actually see the change from when they implemented that to now. So how it was before, and then once they implemented, and the big change that has happened since then. Then we went on a field trip. We took a field trip to Balcones Canyonlands. Our guest speaker was in charge of that. She did all the planning for that. She set it up where we were going to actually see a prescribed fire. And then unfortunately, rain came and it was humid. And so the fire doesn't do what they want it to do when that happens. So we were not able to see our prescribed fire. But what we did do is we had Miss Perky there. She explained her job and what she does there. And then she introduced us to the burn team. And then they described their different jobs. So we got some career education in there. Some of our kids were actually excited and asking a lot of questions about that. They showed us all of the equipment that they would use. They showed us how a drip torch worked. So we did get to see a little fire. But it was a great collaborative near the end before they did their assessment. They actually took us through their burn plan and what their burn plan what they used for their burn plan to figure out our 15-acre plan that we were supposed to see that day. So the kids got to see firsthand what I was going to expect them to do at the end of the program. So then for their assessment, to see how much they learned, they had to create their own prescribed burn plan. So we have an area out to the south of our school that is a big open, about 50 to 100 acres of land where there's nothing there. So I had them figure out what they would do to make a burn plan for that area. They had to go in and use the RAP system and map that area. They had to figure out what the percentage of the annuals, perennials, bushes, trees, bare land was on that area through the RAP program. So they got to use the technology that we've been learning about. And then They did identify some species that were there that we used from the fire effects system. So then they had to come up with an objective. They had to go through and plan out the burn and actually what they would do and how they would implement the burn. And then they had to consider weather conditions. They did have to use a prior date to find out when a day would have been good to use to do that burn. They had to talk about potential risk that doing a burn there would cause. Smoke especially is a big problem. And then they had to talk about who they needed to notify. And they learned that information during our field trip, who they would have to notify to make sure that everybody doesn't go crazy and freak out that there's a burn happening, but that it was actually planned and safety has been used to determine all the things that go into the burn. And so after that, that was the end of our unit. I do recommend that you get a contact person very early on if you plan to go to the location where you're learning from. But overall, I think it was a good success. And I do hope that you enjoy using my lesson.